What is going on, YouTube people? Neo Cards and Comics here. Today, we are going to talk about card shows a little bit. This has been a topic that's been brewing the last few weeks on Off Center. We just kind of discussed this with Fanatics coming into play, with Fanatics Events, and the general kind of malaise in the real world right now with the economy and the election and the time of year. We're heading into the fall. Football's pumping again, fall sports, kids are back in school. The real world is beginning to creep into our little niche of the hobby. And are we starting to see, or are we reaching the tipping point on show saturation? Now, I was not at the Shipshawana show this past weekend, but I know that it was a little bit slower than some of the previous shows at that venue. I heard that from a couple dealers that I know that set up there. I talked to Brad, the promoter of the show, directly, who said they were a little bit lighter, but still busy. I heard it was still a very good crowd. Dealers and attendees both had a really good time. And I don't know if that is a sentiment on shows are slowing down, because we're coming off a summer season where shows have been very busy. The National was packed. Burbank was packed. We are coming up on a Dallas show very quickly. That will be a little bit telling. Fanatics Fest, for their first time out of the gate, was pretty busy. Not slammed, but it was pretty busy. And that was their first time running it. So I think this upcoming Dallas show will be very, very telling, or could be telling. I know of another larger regional show that is potentially a little light on tables in regards to how many tables that they have sold. At this point in time, they're a little behind schedule. So in terms of dealers setting up. But I do wonder, how thin can we stretch these things? Like, we already have a very established network of shows that, to be quite frank, compete with each other. You have Dallas every couple of months. You have Philly. You have Burbank. You have Chantilly. You have the big tentpole ones, the National. You have Fanatics Fest now. You have Fanatics Events now. We have the slightly smaller ones like Culture Collision. And then, there's other big ones out there that I would put in the Culture Collision realm. Like, I believe Minnesota has a very big show. Iowa has a show. I think Denver has a pretty decent sized show that don't quite reach the Dallas level, but they're bigger than, say, like the next tier down, where I would put like a Shipshawana, where it's a big blowout one-day show, not multiple days, at least yet. And it's more regional based. Like, Shipshawana draws from, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, and Ohio are kind of its bedrock, if you will. You don't have a ton of people flying in because, one, it's a pain to fly there, but you get a lot of people commuting in for that show. So there's that level. And there's probably other ones around the country like that. I'm just not familiar with them because they kind of don't bubble up to me seeing them going around the social sphere. And then below that, you have your local shows. Your bread and butter, 50 table, 100 table, 125 table, at the VFW, at the church, maybe in a gym, whatever the case might be. Now you have all that, and all of a sudden we have Fanatics Events starting to roll into place. We had Fanatics Fest. That's kind of something entirely different. It is a card show, but it's not a card show. But the real Fanatics event, I think, that will disrupt the space is what's going to happen in Orlando at the beginning of November. They created finally a Fanatics event Instagram page. This actually went up today. It said, please join us for our next event. We know that is Orlando. They have still not officially canceled Pittsburgh, but I am hearing from everywhere under the sun that Pittsburgh is canceled, the one that was supposed to be at PNC Park. I can tell you, I personally canceled my hotel reservation for that show that I had, even though they have not formally said anything. That was supposed to be late September, and we still don't see anything on it. It seems like all the focus is now heading towards the Orlando show, which is a little over a month away, like 7 weeks away, and we still really don't know much about that. At least the public doesn't. I believe dealers have been contacted, but I have not seen anything publicly facing besides the dates, which is, I believe, the first weekend in November at the Orlando Convention Center. But please don't book travel around that. Wait for Fanatics to officially announce something. I am probably not going to attend that show, but I am poking around potentially attending that show. But that is going to be, from the sounds of it, from everything I could piece together, a traditional card show. It is not going to have the pomp and circumstance of New York, but it is going to just be a big, huge card show. The rumors have been 800 to 900 tables. That is a massive boy. That is a big boy. A 900 table card show is huge. I don't officially know what the national is, but I think 900 tables is probably about twice the size of Dallas. Someone could correct me if I'm wrong on that in the comments. I thought Dallas was between like 4 and 6. I thought Burbank was in that same realm, and this is potentially going to be almost twice the size of that, or at least close to it, if they can actually pull it off. If they could do that, to me, that is a direct threat to the larger shows. Because now, all of a sudden, a 900 table card show that is pure cards starts appealing to the people that would attend the National. And not everyone is made of money. Not everyone can travel to all these different shows. So if all of a sudden, let's say this Orlando Fanatics event turns into a great 900 table card show that they do, I don't know, let's call it once a year. We don't really know how this is going to map out yet, but let's say they have it once a year in Orlando. If you live in the Southeast and you know that Fanatics event is going to put on a great 900 table card show. Now we're doing some assumptions here. When the National rolls around, are you going to spend the time, money, and expense to travel to the National when you have something in your own backyard that is not quite the National, but it's close enough? Most of the dealers that set up at Fanatics Events Orlando are probably going to be dealers that set up at the National. And it'll actually probably be better dealers than what sets up at the National, because they are bringing in typically higher quality dealers. You have the expression that I used at Fanatics Fest New York is, you do not have wasted tables. Now, I don't know if Orlando will play out like that or not. We'll see. But once again, we're assuming they can pull something like this off. Does that affect the Southeast region in regards to what other shows they would travel to? You know, are you going to travel to a Dallas card show if you know that you now have this in your backyard once a year? Assuming you're not someone that's like, I'm going to 5 big shows a year. Or even if you are, let's say you're someone that likes to go to a big show every 2 or 3 months. And now we have Fanatics events popping up around the country in this type of format. You know, does that start to gobble away? Are you now like, well, I'll go to Orlando Fanatics events, I'll go to Dallas, I'll go to the National, and I'll go to Philly, but I'm going to skip Culture Collision this year. Or I'm going to skip, you know, insert other pretty good sized regional show here. Because this one is the same amount of money for me to travel to, and it's a bigger and better show because it's a Fanatics event. The other thing, too, that they are potentially leveraging are better locations. It's a lot easier to convince your wife and kids to go to Orlando for a weekend than it is to go to Rosemont or Burbank or Chantilly or Philly. You know, not throwing shade at any of those places, but Orlando for the family is like a gift, especially if you live on the East Coast anyway. You can throw them at downtown Disney, throw them in a Disney park for a day, go do your thing, go to a park for a day, whatever you need to do to keep the fam happy. You could do that down there. But do these things start chipping away? Is there enough dealers willing to travel around and set up at all these shows, especially these bigger ones, these like 3-4 day shows, 2-day shows, where it takes a commitment? You know, it's not a 1-day show at the local flea market where you're setting up at for an afternoon and you're sacrificing a Saturday. This is, you're probably sacrificing 5 days, a day in travel to get down there, 3 days set up and a day of travel home. That's 5 days that you're taking away from your day job, your store if you're a shop. And which direction are dealers and store owners gonna lean? If the Philly show or Dallas or Burbank comes to you and says, hey, we'd like you to set up. You got your show schedule mapped out, and let's say you set up at 6 shows a year. You got them all laid out. Fanatics comes a knocking. Hey, we'd like you to set up in Orlando or Denver or Vegas, or pick some random big city where Fanatics events may go. We'd like you to set up at our show. If you're a shop owner or a breaker or someone that's, trying to flirt with getting deeper into the hobby, are you going to tell Fanatics no? Or are you going to say, yes, sir, may I have another? And sign on the dotted line to get in their good graces or get in the appearance of their good graces? Do you really want to say no? And then, I don't know, they may or may not do this, but your name goes on a list somewhere. And maybe it's just a small little checkpoint. Maybe it's, hey, we got an application from so-and-so in Canton, Ohio. They're looking to get allocation. And then you kind of like work down the list. Oh, okay, cool. Like they promote us on social media. Cool. They did a hobby rip night. They participated in baseball card day. It seems like they push Topps products quite a bit. Okay, cool. And it's between you and a shop in Akron, Ohio. And you scroll down and the shop in Canton was like, yep, signed up, participated in Fanatics Fest. They set up at Orlando. And then you look at the one in Akron and it's like, oh, they skipped Fanatics Fest. They skipped Orlando. They haven't done any shows with us. Everything else is virtually the same. And maybe they only have X number of slots. Which way do you think they're going to go? It's just human nature. And maybe they don't check that deep. I have no idea, but you can guarantee people are going to think that. And let's say Fanatics Events takes off. Let's say this is the new hotness. Don't you want to make sure that you're kind of grandfathered into a degree? Now, I don't know that Fanatics Events is going to play that game. I think they've learned from the National of you don't just get a table because you had a table before. I think there's going to be New York, you had to apply. I think Orlando was similar. They're getting ready to open it up to the general public for dealers to sign up. But the existing dealers from New York got early access to that, I believe. That's based off what I saw on social and some chatter that I've heard. But, the same thing applies. A dealer may only have 6 travel shows in them a year. And that might already be set. What if Fanatics Events starts peeling some of those dealers off? Now, do the other shows have enough dealers to fill the room? Let's say they can only fill 75% of the room. Now what happens? Me, as an attendee, paid to attend the show, to walk around, look around, check out the show, and I'm like, oh man, there's like a ton of empty space in here. Why aren't these tables filled out? This kind of sucks. I didn't get the bang for the buck. I didn't get the full, it felt like I got cheated out on the experience because the venue was half empty. So what am I going to do? I'm going to look on social media and be like, hey man, that Fanatics event thing is popping. I got to go to that. So next year rolls around and I'm going to skip the pick whatever regional size show that you want to. That's like a 2 or 3 day show. Okay, I'll pass on that one. I'll go to the Orlando Fanatics event or New York Fanatics Fest, whatever. There's only so much travel money going around, whether it's maybe you go to 2 shows a year, 2 big shows a year. Maybe you go to Dallas and the National. Maybe you go to the National in Philly. Maybe you go to Philly and Chantilly, whatever it is. So I do worry that we might be encroaching on big show fatigue, or just there's just not enough. We're spreading things a little too thin. It's like when you're making the peanut butter sandwich and you get all the way down to the bottom and you are scraping the side of that thing because you got no more peanut butter in the house and you don't want to go to the store. And you got one little chunk on that butter knife and you're trying to cover the whole piece of bread. And now all of a sudden you're starting to get a little bit of holes in there. You're spreading it out and there's just bread. There's no peanut butter left on it anymore. Are we heading towards that? And then, like I said, there's just the general real life stuff going on. I do believe the show scene is a little cyclical. You know, we are now in that time of year where I personally think, and you're probably going to see chatter about this online, where things just generally start to slow down anyway. Football, Friday night football, kids are in football, school's back in session, basketball season starting. I'm talking like high school basketball. Parents are running around like nuts, taking their kids to all these different things. There's dances, there's homecomings, there's this, that, the other thing. And all of a sudden, you don't have the weekend to go to Shipshawana for a full day, day and a half, whatever it is. So you got to skip this one. I'll be back in March. I'll pass on this one. Then we head into the holidays, and that obviously that's a money sink. A lot of money gets pulled out to Christmas and time. And not a lot of shows run in December and January anyway. So things kind of slow down this back half of the year and the beginning part of the year. And then the spring comes and, February, March kicks up, and we usually see a surge to shows. That's usually the March ship show is crazy because I think everyone has pent up energy because they haven't been to a show for a few months. They got their Christmas bills paid off. They got their tax return. They are ready to rock and roll. And usually those March shows into spring, into summer, usually really hit off big. And then the summer is where you have your tentpole shows. You have the National, you have Fanatics Fest New York now. And then we head back into the fall again, and things kind of start to slow down a little bit again as everyone kind of jumps back into school life in the real world for a little bit to close out the year. So some of it just could be a little bit of that. So what are you all seeing and feeling out there? Are your local shows still popping? Or the regional shows that you attend still popping? I think most of the summer they have been. But I'm curious to watch what happens to close out the year. Are they just the general normal slowdown, or are they slower than normal? Do we start to see some cannibalization of, sorry, I can't do this mid-tier regional show anymore because Fanatics Events is knocking. One last thing real quick to kind of close out on this that popped up today, speaking of the Shipshawana show. Friend of the channel, Brad Beeman, who runs the ship show, has joined forces with Card Collector 2 as the director of events. And they talk about quarterly shows upcoming in the future. Built for collectors by collectors. Now, Brad already puts on 3 shows a year, which sounds like those are staying. And so it sounds like there will be a 4th show if they're going quarterly. That would be 4 shows a year added to the arsenal. And then I'm sure there'll be a bunch of other things event-wise because Ryan has events at the shop all the time. I am planning on attending Rip Night there in a couple weeks down at Card Collectors 2 shop in Grove City. But it sounds like Card Collector 2 could be getting into is getting into the card show scene with Brad leading things. And Brad has done a fantastic job building the Shipshawana show from a little tiny show in the middle of nowhere to a excellent regional show in the middle of nowhere. So now you combine their 2 powers together. I'll be very curious to see where this goes into the future. But he already has multiple Shipshawana shows a year and the Fort Wayne show. One of those is in March. One they just had on Labor Day. The Fort Wayne show is in November, closer to Thanksgiving. It's in early November this year. And so there's a kind of a hole in the middle of summer for something. So we'll see what they cook up for that. If they're going to do one every quarter, that would pretty much cover it if they can figure out a summer show. And no word on where that'll be located yet, but I think we could probably piece together some puzzle pieces on that one. It's not a big logic leap to where a 4th show might be located at for that one. So we'll see where that goes as well. But that's another, these smaller shows kind of level up into slightly bigger shows. That starts piecing away at things as well. So as always, curious for your thoughts and comments down below. Let me know what you all are seeing out there, especially going forward. I think we've had a very good summer season, but let's see what happens this fall as people have to get back to the real world for a little bit. Catch you boys and girls in the next one. Peace.